Welcome everyone to Swamp Horror Stories. I'm going to be trying something different for a while. My personal life is getting busy, so I don't have as much time as I used to. So I won't have as many picture effects to watch. But then, this channel was never meant to be viewed, mostly heard. So please forgive and reach out if you really liked the addition of the pictures. And if I ever reach 1,000 subs where I can have more free time, the pictures would definitely come back. So let's go ahead and start the story. And I call this one The Goatman of Melville. Folks who pass through Melville, Louisiana usually don't see much reason to be afraid of the place. It's a small town setting near the Atchafalaya River, surrounded by bottomlands, old levees, cane fields, and stretches of swamp that seem to go on forever. During the day, fishermen launch their boats, trucks rumble along the highway, and people wave when they pass. But nighttime is different, especially along the old rivers near the roads. The old-timers around Melville have a warning. If you hear something walking behind you, don't turn around, because it might be the Goatman. First heard the story from an old fisherman named Boudreaux. I had stopped at a little bait shop outside of town one afternoon. Boudreaux was sitting beneath the awning with a styrofoam cup of hot coffee, watching storm clouds build over the river. Somehow we got to talking about strange things people had seen in the woods around here. Boudreaux listened quietly. Then he asked me something. Ever been down that old levee road after midnight? I told him I hadn't. Good, he said. Then he stared toward the woods. Keep it that way. Naturally, I just had to ask why. Boudreaux rubbed his gray beard. There's something walking around down there that ain't supposed to exist. He told me people had been seeing it for decades. A tall creature, 7 feet, maybe taller. Built like a man through the shoulders and chest, but covered with coarse black hair from the waist down. Its legs bent backward like a goat's. And where feet should have been, there were hooves. But the head was what people remembered. Long face, heavy horns curling backward, and 2 pale yellow eyes. Boudreaux leaned toward me. Worst thing, ain't seeing him. What is it? Hearing him follow you. About 3 weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I was driving through Melville late one evening after visiting a friend. Instead of taking the highway home, I turned onto an old gravel road running beside the levee. At first, everything seemed normal. My headlights swept across willow trees and patches of tall grass. Frogs called from drainage ditches. Occasionally, something small darted across the road. Then I noticed something strange. No insects were hitting the windshield. No frogs were calling. Everything had gone silent. I slowed down. That's when something stepped into the road ahead of me. At first, thought it was a deer. Then it stood upright. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. The creature was enormous. Its shoulders were nearly as wide as the hood of my truck. Long arms hung beside its body. Then it took one slow step forward. Clop. I heard it even through the closed windows. Another step. Clop. Hooves. I remember Boudreaux's story, the Goatman. I slammed the truck into reverse. That's when the creature lowered its head. 2 curved horns caught the headlights, and then it charged. I backed down that gravel road faster than I should have. Branches scraped both sides of the truck. The Goatman disappeared from the headlights. For a few seconds, I thought I'd gotten away. Then something slammed into the side of the passenger door. The whole truck rocked. I nearly went into the ditch. I looked through the passenger window, but I could see nothing. Then something struck the bed. The back end dropped like someone had jumped into it. I looked in the rearview mirror. 2 yellow eyes were staring through the back glass. The Goatman was crouched in the bed of my truck. I punched the accelerator. The engine screamed. The creature held on. I could hear those hooves scraping against the metal. Then came something I'll never forget. It laughed. It wasn't a sound of an animal. It wasn't a growl. It was laughter. Deep, raspy, almost human. I hit a pothole hard enough to throw everything loose inside the cab. When I looked back again, the truck bed was empty. A mile further down the road, I spotted an abandoned hunting cabin. I don't know why, but I stopped. Maybe I wanted to inspect the truck. Maybe I simply needed a minute to calm down. That was my mistake. I stepped outside with a flashlight. 3 deep scratches ran alongside the passenger door. Then I noticed something in the dirt. Tracks. Hoof prints. Goat tracks. They started beside the truck, then continued toward the cabin. I should have left immediately. Instead, I followed them. The cabin door was hanging partly open. Inside were an old table, broken chairs, beer bottles, and hunting magazines scattered across the floor. Then my flashlight landed on the wall. Someone had carved words into the wood. Do not answer him. I stared at those words. That's when something spoke from outside. Hey! My blood turned cold. It sounded exactly like Boudreaux. Come out here! I didn't move. Then the voice changed. This time it sounded like my old friend, whom I visited earlier. You all right in there? I backed toward the wall. Then another voice came. My mother's voice. She had been dead for years. Hun, come outside. Something walked onto the porch. Clop, clop. The floorboards creaked. Then came 3 slow knocks. I raised my flashlight toward the doorway. Nothing entered. Instead, a shadow passed across the opening. 2 horns stretched across the wall behind me. I remembered the words carved into the wall. Don't answer him. The Goatman spoke again, this time using my own voice. Come outside. I covered my mouth. The creature walked around the cabin, 1 hoof step at a time. It stopped beneath the window. Slowly, something rose into view. First the horns, then the forehead, then 2 yellow eyes. The Goatman stared through the dirty glass and smiled. Its mouth was far too wide. I don't know how long we stared at each other. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes. Then somewhere far away a church bell rang. Goatman's smile disappeared. Its head snapped toward the sound. Then it dropped from the window. I heard hooves pounding across the porch, then through the grass, then nothing. Following morning, I found Boudreaux at the same bait shop. Before I said anything, he looked at the scratches on my truck. His face changed. You went down there? I nodded. He sighed. Then I told him about the cabin, about the voices, about the warning carved into the wall. Boudreaux listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said something that bothered me even more. That cabin, he said, it's been burned down near 20 years. I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He told me hunters once used it during deer season. One night, 3 men disappeared from there. The 4th man came stumbling into Melville barefoot at sunrise. He refused to say what happened. Only thing he kept repeating was, we answered him. A few weeks later, the cabin mysteriously burned. Nothing remained except the chimney. I drove back there that afternoon with Boudreaux. The road was easy to find. So was the place where I had stopped. But there was no cabin, only weeds, and an old black chimney covered in vines. I walked around the clearing. Then Boudreaux pointed toward the ground. Hoof prints. They circled the chimney, then continued into the woods. I never drove that levee road again, but years later, I passed through Melville late one night. I stopped for gas. While I was standing beside the pump, I heard something across the highway. Clop. I froze. Across the road stood a dark figure beneath a large oak tree. Two yellow eyes watched me. Then the figure slowly stepped back into the darkness. Before disappearing, it raised one long arm and waved. I got into my truck and left. I haven't stopped in Melville after midnight since. But fishermen still tell stories. Hunters still occasionally find enormous footprints along the levee. Dogs sometimes refuse to enter certain stretches of woods. And every once in a while, someone driving alone late at night reports hearing something running beside their vehicle. Clop, 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 clop. So if you're ever passing through Melville after midnight and you hear something behind you, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't turn around. And whatever you do, if something in the darkness calls your name, do not answer it. Because the old timers around Melville say the Goatman doesn't need to catch you. He only needs you to answer. For almost 2 years after that night, I convinced myself it was over. I never went down the levee road again. I never went looking for the old cabin. And whenever I passed anywhere near Melville after sunset, I keep driving. Boudreaux's warning stays with me. Don't answer him. I thought that was the rule. I was wrong. Because I eventually learned something much worse. You don't have to answer the Goatman for him to remember you. And sometimes he follows you home. It started on a cold night in January. A storm had moved through earlier that evening, and the temperature had dropped fast. Wind rattled the trees around my place, and every now and then a dead limb would scrape across the tin roof. I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee when I heard something outside. Clop. I stopped. For a moment I thought something had fallen from a tree. Then I heard it again. Clop. Closer. I slowly stood. My first thought was Boudreaux, but that didn't make sense. I wasn't anywhere near Melville. I walked to the window and looked outside. The yard was empty. I started to turn away. Then I heard a knock. I froze. 3 knocks, exactly like at the cabin. I didn't answer. Then somebody spoke from the other side. Hey! My stomach tightened. I knew that voice. It was Boudreaux's. Open up! I didn't move. It's me! There was something wrong with the way he said it. The words were right. The voice was right. But the emotion was all wrong. It sounded like someone repeating words they had heard before. Then came another voice, my friend's voice. You all right in there? The exact words I'd heard outside that cabin. I backed away from the door. Then the voice changed again. This time it became mine. Open the door. I grabbed my flashlight. Then something heavy stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned beneath its weight. A shadow passed across the front window, and 2 long horns appeared against the curtain. The Goatman had found me. I stayed awake until daylight. Whatever stood outside never came in, but it didn't leave either. Every hour or so, I heard hoofs scrape across the porch. Once, something slowly dragged across the outside wall. Another time, I heard breathing beneath the window. Just before sunrise, everything stopped. I waited another hour before opening the door. There were muddy hoof prints across the porch. They stopped directly in front of my door. Carved into the wood were 3 deep scratches, but underneath them was something else, a symbol. A circle with two crooked lines coming from the top. Looked almost like horns. I remember Boudreaux telling me about strange markings people sometimes found near the levee. I drove to Melville that afternoon. The bait shop was closed. A handwritten sign hung in the window. Closed until further notice. I asked around town about Boudreaux. Most people didn't want to talk. Finally, an older woman working at a little store looked at me strangely. You didn't hear? Hear what? Boudreaux disappeared. My stomach dropped. When? She thought for a moment. 3 nights ago. 3 nights. I asked where he'd gone. Nobody knew. His truck had been found beside the levee. Driver's door open, keys still inside. His fishing gear hadn't been touched, but there were hoof prints around the truck. The woman told me Boudreaux had a small camp near the river. I drove there before dark. His door wasn't locked. Inside, everything looked normal. Coffee cup beside the sink, jacket hanging over a chair, fishing poles leaning against the wall. Then I noticed a notebook on the table. First half was mostly fishing information, water levels, weather, places he caught fish. Then the entries changed. October 17th, heard him again. October 24th, tracks behind the camp. November 2nd, he called my name from the woods. Then one entry caught my attention. December 11th, it isn't one creature. I read that twice. The next page had a drawing. 3 tall figures standing among cypress trees. Each had horns. Underneath, Boudreaux had written, "People keep calling it the Goatman. They're wrong." The final entry had been written 3 nights earlier, the night Boudreaux disappeared. They're gathering near the old ferry landing. And beneath that, if I don't come back, don't follow my voice. I should have gone home. Instead, I waited until the following afternoon and headed toward the abandoned ferry landing. I told myself I was looking for Boudreaux. Truth is, part of me needed to know what he'd discovered. The old road was nearly swallowed by woods. I parked before sunset and continued on foot. About half a mile in, I found his hat. It was hanging from a low branch. 10 yards further, I found his flashlight. Then I heard somebody ahead. "Hey!" It was Boudreaux. I stopped. "Over here!" His voice came from the trees. I didn't answer. "I'm hurt!" I tightened my grip on the flashlight. Then something stepped between 2 cypress trees. Boudreaux. At least it looked like him. He stood maybe 50 yards away. His clothes were muddy. His head hung forward. Then he lifted his face. "Help me." I almost went to him. Then I looked at his feet. They weren't touching the ground. He was hanging several inches above it. Something enormous was standing behind him. 2 long arms held him beneath the shoulders. Then the creature stepped forward. Clop. Boudreaux's body moved with it. Clop. The goat man was using him like a puppet. I backed away. Then another hoof step sounded behind me. I turned. A second pair of yellow eyes appeared among the trees. Then another and another. Boudreaux had been right. There wasn't one goat man. There were many. I ran. Branches tore at my clothes. Hooves pounded behind me. But they weren't chasing fast. They were herding me. Every time I tried turning toward the road, something moved through the woods and forced me in another direction. Eventually, I stumbled into a clearing. In the center stood an enormous dead oak tree. Dozens of objects hung from its branches. Fishing hats, boots, license plates, pieces of clothing, and several old wooden signs. Some looked decades old. Then I noticed names carved into the trunk. Hundreds of them. I recognized one. Boudreaux. Freshly carved. Then I saw another. My own. I stepped backward. Something laughed behind me. That deep, broken laughter I'd heard years earlier. The goat man stepped into the clearing. Then another appeared beside him. Then another. 5 altogether. Maybe more hidden in the woods. The largest walked toward me. Its horns were enormous. One was broken near the tip. Its yellow eyes never blinked. Then it spoke, using Boudreaux's voice. "You came back." I didn't answer. It took another step. "You always come back." Then the other creatures began whispering, different voices. Men, women, children, some crying, some laughing. Then all the voices suddenly became one, my voice. "Answer me." I kept my mouth shut. The creatures moved closer. That's when I heard an engine. Headlights burst through the trees. An old pickup smashed through the brush and entered the clearing. Boudreaux's truck, but nobody was driving. The horn blasted continuously. The goat men turned toward it. For the first time, they seemed afraid. The driver's door swung open. I didn't question it. I ran. I jumped behind the wheel. Engine was still running. I slammed the truck into gear. As I drove away, something struck the side of the truck. Another creature ran beside the passenger window. Its face was inches from mine. Then the truck broke through the trees and reached the old road. The creatures stopped following. I looked in the rearview mirror. 5 dark figures stood across the road. The largest one raised its arm and waved, just like the creature at the gas station. I didn't stop until I reached the highway. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely steer. Then I noticed something sitting on the passenger seat. It was Boudreaux's notebook. I hadn't brought it with me. It was open to page I'd never seen. There was only one sentence. They can't cross running water unless someone invites them. I stared at those words. Then I remembered something. First time I'd encountered the goat men, I'd crossed several drainage canals while escaping. Maybe that was why they stopped following. But then another thought occurred to me. If they couldn't cross running water without being invited, how had one reached my house? I turned the page. There was another sentence. This one wasn't written in Boudreaux's handwriting. The letters were scratched deeply into the paper. "You already invited us." I nearly drove off the road, because suddenly I remembered the night at the abandoned cabin. The goat man had spoken using my friend's voice. "You all right?" And without thinking, before I realized what was happening, I had whispered something, 2 words. "I'm fine." I had answered him. Boudreaux's warning had come too late. I never found Boudreaux. His truck disappeared from my driveway 3 nights later. Nobody saw who took it. But sometimes late at night, people around Melville claim they see an old pickup truck traveling slowly along the levee. No headlights, no driver, and something tall sitting in the passenger seat. I've also learned something else. The goat man isn't tied to one road, or one cabin, or even Melville for that matter. The old stories stretch along the river, from one community to another, always near water, always near places where people disappear, and always the same warning. Don't answer the voice, because once it learns your voice, it can use it. And once you answer, it can follow. Last night, just after midnight, I heard 3 knocks against my bedroom window. I didn't look. Then Boudreaux whispered from the other side of the glass, "It's getting closer." I kept my eyes shut. Then another voice answered him from somewhere inside my house. My voice. "I know." And that's when I realized something was already standing in my hallway. Tune in again for more exciting stories from the Swamp Horror Stories. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on the next ones. Until then, God bless and be safe and For God's sake, stay out of those swamps.